future. This is Future Talk.
Future Talk. Welcome to Future Talk. No, but really, welcome to a most excellent 80s movie podcast on the Most Excellent Podcast Network. It's a podcast where a filmmaker and a comedian take a very close look at the neighborhood shenanigans of the 80s movies that we love. This is Season 1, Episode 10, The Burbs, our movie selection from 1989.
All Tom Hanks wanted was a quiet vacation at home.
This is what I need, Carol. I need this.
Welcome to Mayfield Place. A typical street in the Burbs.
Morning, Walter.
Where nothing much ever happened.
Walter's dog just took a dump on Rumsfield's lawn again.
Until the Klopeks moved in.
Klopex? Klopex. Klopek. No one goes in, no one comes out. Neighbors from hell.
It was a nice place to live.
He said he thinks the Klopeks are evil incarnate.
Well, you're much too smart to fall for that, aren't you, honey?
But now,
Carol!
you wouldn't want to visit there.
Ray, this is Walter.
The Burbs.
I'm going over the fence, and I'm not coming back till I find a dead body.
Ray, do you want him to take your family, kidnap them, tear their livers out, and make some kind of satanic pate? We found Walter!
We got a real problem.
I hit the gas line, I'd run!
God, I love this street.
Tom Hanks.
I think we are overreacting.
No. The Burbs. It's one hell of a neighborhood.
Hey, honey, I think we should move.
The Burbs. I'm Chrissy Lenz, improviser and director at the National Comedy Theater, Phoenix. And with me tonight is...
Nathan Blackwell, filmmaker, man about town, writer-director of Squishy Studios.
Yeah. All right. So what is your history with The Burbs?
I don't think I've seen this since I first rented it on VHS.
Oh, no!
I don't think I've seen it since 1991. So it's been a while. But I definitely remember seeing it. It was... Yeah, we had a neighborhood video store, Superstar Video, and rest in peace. And so we didn't go when we were young, and I had a single mom, and we didn't go to movies all that often. There were just like a couple of them that we would go to every year, like the big ones, like the Star Wars movies, or Karate Kid, like these big marquee ones. But all these kind of like weird looking neat ones, that was always Dollar Day at Superstar Video, so we'd get a movie about once a week or so, and The Burbs was one of those. Yeah, it's been
a while. I remember seeing this movie in the theaters. This is 1989, so I'm 8 at this point. We were actually visiting Universal Studios when they were filming this at Universal Studios. So I remember being with my family and taking the studio tour, and during the part where they would sort of drive through the neighborhood where the Munsters house is, which is where they filmed this. Now it's like where the housewives...
Desperate, yeah.
The Desperate Housewives, not the Real Housewives, the desperate ones.
Some Desperate Housewives is filmed.
And we couldn't go down that street, and the tour guide's like, they're filming a movie right there, right now. It's The Burbs with Tom Hanks. And I remember they stopped for a minute, and they were like, be very quiet. And we like heard screaming, like, ah! And so I've always felt
a connection.
So, yeah, we went to see it in the theater. Yeah, and I remember quoting this movie with my siblings a lot, like especially the Satan is good, Satan is our pal. So I did have 2 fun facts that I looked up that I wanted to share right from the top before we jump in.
Right.
Because I think it'll put it in context a little bit. But I guess there was a writer's strike happening.
Yes,
when
that was.
this.
I wanted to bring that up because one thing, it's like definitely at the beginning, it's pretty well done, but as the movie unfolds or unspools, you definitely kind of sense like, oh, they kind of let them improv a lot on this. There's a lot of like bits of fat, or just like a lot of just extra unnecessary shoe leather, like people going up, rooftops and then eating crackers, and then like little side bits, and like they couldn't. It's like they need to kind of trim out like a good 8 minutes out of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. And because they weren't actually allowed to do any writing, so they just
during the writer's strike, you're not allowed to physically do any rewriting. Like the writer is not allowed to come up with stuff. So basically, the way around that is actors improvising, like just making things up on the spot. But you can't. Yeah, that's another good argument to getting the script as good as possible before you start making a movie.
Yeah. And I guess they shot it in sequence, which like we just did Breakfast Club, which was also shot in sequence, and we're like, well, that's so unusual. But
and E.T. too.
So do you think that was so that if they had to improvise something, they wouldn't have to go back and reshoot?
Well, with the Burbs, it looks like the whole thing was on the lot, and so they had that entire neighborhood. It was all outdoor set, and then probably the indoor sets were actually the same as the outdoor. Like you'd go into them with some exceptions, like like I'm sure like the house where they're like chainsawing stuff up, that was a special build. And probably the bad guy's house, not to generalize or specify. In the alternate ending, it's hard to tell who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know. Maybe that was kind of a consideration with the writer's strike. Depends on if it happened like during the movie or beforehand. But yeah, that you could kind of. You could definitely make that would be as a director, you'd make that argument of like, well, I mean, we've got, the whole thing is on the lot. Let's just shoot in sequence, and any improvs we come up with, we can develop and continue to have throughout the movie. So that does make some sense.
Yeah, because I think that a lot of the Tom Hanks rant at the end was improvised, and like the part where he picks up his gurney and puts it into the thing. Was all interesting. So I thought that was an interesting thing to mention right at the top. And then just the other thing that I thought was really a special fun fact was that the poodle, Queenie, is also Precious from Silence of the Lambs. So
wow,
that dog did a lot of work in the late 80s, early 90s. That dog is a superstar. All right, the Burbs. So we start with that zoom in on planet Earth.
Right, the Google Maps zoom in.
That must have been really impressive in 1989.
Oh,
though.
yeah. It's kind of like the computer-generated sequence in like Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, where like the planet's being built. No one had ever seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And the whole symbolism in the Burbs is like, this is just one little corner in this tiny world. This is their kind of like little. We never leave this small little cul-de-sac. It's the whole story, the whole movie is just all in this small little space.
And so Tom Hanks was sort of nervous about taking this role because he was playing a dad, and he didn't want to be seen as a dad. He still wanted to be, big and all the things he'd been doing so well.
Yeah, Big was only a couple of years ago.
But I love how this movie starts where he's just out in his yard, and he hears all these weird sounds from his neighbor's basement, and then he steps onto their dead lawn, and the wind starts blowing. He steps on his lawn, and it immediately stops. And then we sort of meet the characters of the neighborhood.
Yeah, we do the introduction. We meet Bruce Dern, and who's kind of an ex-Vietnam vet, military nut, and then his super hot wife, who enjoys very skimpy outfits
and gardening
and has no tan lines. And then we've got the old fussy neighbor who has a toupee and a poodle,
Walter.
Yeah. And then we've got the quote unquote best friend / worst enemy. That's Art, played by a Canadian comedian whose name escapes me.
It's a hard name to remember. That's all I know. And then Corey Feldman, who also lives on this block.
Yeah.
What is his deal?
Yeah, I think does he live on the block, or is he just painting
visiting his parents' house,
or painting the house. Yeah,
he says he says a couple of times that it is his parents' house.
Okay, and so looks like he's doing some odd jobs for them as they're out of town.
Okay,
yeah,
it must be spring break or something because the kid's out of school.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks has taken some time off for his nervous
the kid
exhaustion.
Who is not in the last hour of the movie.
No, he's not an important thing. They could have not had a kid and it would have been fine. So Corey Feldman is just sort of there and he's like painting the house, but he's painting it both baby blue and fire engine red.
It's not his forte.
No.
It's not his calling.
He's playing music really loud, spilling paint everywhere, which really upset me, and like wearing leather jackets.
Yeah, that upset me.
But what I did like is that even though I could not figure out what his deal is, because he's like drinking beer with them too. Mm-hmm. Could not figure out what his deal is, but you know what? He's so like open and curious.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Just supportive of the people in the neighborhood. He just wants to be a part of it.
Yeah, he's kind of the commenter. He's not the participant.
Right. So what did the sense did you get?
We're missing Carrie Fisher. We can't. Yeah,
you have to marry Carrie Fisher. So what did you think of like when we first meet Carrie Fisher and the son and Tom Hanks in his situation? Like, what was your take on what was happening here at the beginning? Because I thought it was really unclear.
Oh, in terms of their relationship, or just like what's the situation, or
what the motivation was for him to, in that scene where they established that he's taken the week off from work,
right?
But he's not going to go to the lake,
right? They're
not going to go to a cottage, but he somehow needs this rest, for reasons.
Yeah, well, so we don't know why, but I guess we're just meant to believe that he's like just like us, and he's got a week of vacation, but he's not actually going to go somewhere and have an adventure. He just wants to sit around the house and drink a beer and watch the ball game. He wants to have
staycation.
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
The first one to do it.
Caught on film.
But why? Like, is it just like he's experiencing existential dread and the spiritual ennui of the suburbs? Like, what was his problem?
I thought he made his argument pretty clear with that he didn't want to go out to the cabin where you'd have an annoying neighbor and you get bit by bugs. He really didn't want to do anything except be lazy.
I kept feeling like Carrie Fisher kept hinting at, you're going to come back at the end of this week and be worse than you were before. Like, as if he was on the line about to snap or something. And, I didn't get that sense from him. And maybe that's a writer thing.
Yeah.
Maybe they could have cleared that up if they were able to.
There were definitely kind of two different tones going on between them. Like, there was something a little development missing between Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher, like in terms of like just kind of like as things progress, them kind of realigning and communicating and
because I didn't get the sense that like they needed to clear it up. They needed to sort of just let me know what is the deal that he's so stressed out about, because they're fighting a lot and they fight in a really mean, yelly way, and then they'll be watching Jeopardy together and it's cute as heck. And
it just needed to be calibrated a bit.
There were some male-female relationship issues in this movie that I'm going to take to task when we get to. I'm going to put a pin in it for now.
All right, writing it down.
Put a pin in it for now. But I think that this is a trope of the 80s too, where like people would go eat breakfast in other people's houses. Art comes over and eats
establishes himself as the annoying neighbor and basically starts grabbing food out of the fridge,
including an entire pineapple.
Yes, the king of fruit.
And at some point he eats dog food.
What? When does this happen?
Yeah, so this is one of my, I'm going to call it a dishwasher moment from now on.
Okay.
Based on Vacation.
Right.
Chevy Chase putting the dishes back in the cabinet. He's grabbing food out of wherever he can. Carrie Fisher walks by with the dog bowl. Art grabs just a fistful of it and shoves it in his mouth and then like reacts. Mm-hmm. And then you see just over his shoulder, her set it down and call the dog.
Right.
It's a blink and you miss it.
I blinked. Yeah, I felt like the first, I wouldn't even say first half, like the first 45% was working really well.
Yeah.
You know, like
I like the part where they're daring each other to walk up to the neighbor's door, and it's that whole like, "Are you chicken? Well, are you chicken?"
Yeah, it wasn't until they decided to go all in and investigate their crazy, suspicious neighbors that things started to kind of loosen up and kind of get a little fatty in terms of the story and all that stuff. But I thought so. Okay, so this movie is directed by Joe Dante, who has directed such films as Gremlins, Gremlins 2, Inner Space. Dude, he did Gremlins 2. He did both of them, right?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Inner Space, which
I love.
right.
Inner Space.
Small Soldiers. So it's super clear that Warner Brothers cartoons and Looney Tunes and things like that are a big influence on him for this movie, because it definitely has that kind of energy and like cartoon vibe. I think he even did an Amazing Stories that was basically like a cartoon episode.
Yes, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, so he's definitely wearing it on his sleeve for this episode, and he's using it really well. And the times that this movie gets bogged down is when it's not as cinematic, and it's a lot of like 5 people in a room, and we're panning over to here, and they're doing a thing, and then we're cutting over to something else. It's when it's a little flat. It's not quite alive. You know?
I thought it was pretty funny though when they like cut to the dog, like as they're walking up to the porch the first time when they get attacked by bees. They cut in on everybody's face real tight, and then they cut in on the poodle. That struck me funny.
So yeah, and then I also thought Joe Dante did a great job of. It's like so these neighbors who live in a monotone gray house with dead plants. They're mysterious, dark, and evil.
Although a lot of people would pay a lot of money for the antiquing they've got going on their paint on their house.
Yeah,
like,
I mean inside it's a different story. But
people pay big bucks to have the
distressed jeans. So
they see the trash thing happen.
Right.
The trash thing happens, and would you say that's kind of the turning point from?
So Joe Dante does a great job of like creating melodrama without giving us any answers. Like Tom Hanks creating like the supernatural and the feel like something is big going on throughout the movie for like the first hour before we even have like an inkling of what's going on. Like there's like a weird lights coming out of the basement, and then there's like fog. He steps onto the front yard, and all this wind is blowing. The neighbor he throws these huge trash bags into the trash. The metal
drives
trash
it to the curb in the car.
Yeah, that's great. And you're like, why? And then the characters call him out. Call that out. It's like, I've never seen anyone drive the trash to the front end and then whack it with a big stick. Yeah, and so what you've got is like you've got the neighbor like putting the trash into the bin and then hammering it down with like a hoe, you know, and that
he also drove down to the curb with him.
But you get the motion and energy of like he's killing something, and it's still not revealing anything in the story. And there's like another moment where Tom Hanks has a dream, and things go over the top, and so you're able to kind of get these big cartoony moments when we still don't know anything about the neighbors.
We don't, yeah. And they find the neighbor's dog. They find Walter's precious little poodle, Queenie, and of course, Walter would never leave Queenie behind. Which there's a moment where the sexy wife of Bruce Dern's character picks up the dog, and she does what I always like to call bad improv in movies, where she narrates aloud the actions that she's taking. You wouldn't believe how much trouble I have teaching people not to do this in their improv scenes, where she's like, well, hello, little dog. Well, you're all dirty, and I wonder if Walter knows that you're outside. Let's just take you in and see what the thing is. Like, I get that she's talking to the dog, but like, show us, don't tell us.
Right.
But they use that as justification to straight up break in to Walter's house.
Oh yeah,
steal his stuff.
They are shameless in breaking into homes,
and breaking things in the home
in front of people.
Yes,
tearing off the wallpaper in front of the.
Rips it. Yeah, they have real boundary issues.
Yeah.
They find his toupee, and that's like evidence that something terrible has happened. And
Yeah,
now...
so the wives finally say, cut the crap. They get a plate full of brownies. They're going to talk to the neighbors. And they actually meet the neighbors and go into the Klopex. Am I pronouncing that right?
Klopex, yep.
Klopex. The Klopex home.
So this might be a good moment to talk about the treatment of the 80s ladies.
Yes.
In this movie. Because it was not great. Like, constantly Art has this narrative of... What, are you going to listen to your wife? Don't do what your wife says. You're coming over here to smoke cigars. You're going to wait from your wife. Like, being a wife is the worst thing you can be in this guy's universe. He's causing a lot of fights between...
Yeah, girls. And his wife is away, so he's able to be like the rooster, you know.
Yeah, and, you know, like, the wives are totally being the voice of reason. Let's go over there. Yeah. Let's just ask questions. Let's be polite. You know, our plan is to just... be cool and friendly and see what we can do. And they're so mean to them. Immediately after we leave the Klopex house, we need to talk about what happens in the Klopex house. But as soon as they leave, Ray is like, I think the ladies are right. We clearly have lost our minds on this one, guys. Let's go talk in the study. Ladies, you're correct. Mm-hmm. And then immediately they're both like, take your balls out of your wife's purse, man. What are you, pussy whipped? And then he's like, yeah, we got to go over there and break in right away.
Right.
And I guess he's able to just send Carrie Fisher away. Go.
Be gone.
Be gone.
You are dismissed.
I don't want you here. But yeah, it's like this.
Carrie Fisher, side note, looks great.
Oh my God, she looks amazing. Well, that's what I wanted to mention too. Like, the wives are always dressed so nice. I guess it's that suburban preppy sort of thing. Like, they're always dressed in really nice dresses. They look fantastic. Carrie Fisher looks amazing. The woman who plays Bruce Dern's wife, of course, looks fantastic. And their husbands sort of treat them terribly. It's
like garbage.
It's this joke version of toxic masculinity, which is like, but isn't it funny how horribly we treat our wives? And I'm glad to say that isn't as much of a joke anymore. When you see it in these 80s movies, it just like really jumps out.
That's really the dated aspect of this movie. And I mean, as some of these 80s movies go, I would not say that the Burbs has tons of datedness. It's just it's just a couple of blips.
It's just that. Yeah, I would say that probably is
that, and we don't see anyone but white people into the last 2 minutes of the
film. That's absolutely correct. 100% correct. And just like his fights with Carrie Fisher are always so, like, he's yelling at her because she's trying to tell him to take a relaxing vacation.
Yeah.
And he's screaming at her. Anyway, so in the Klopex house, yes, I love Bruce Dern keeps turning that painting over to try and figure out which way it goes. And he's ripping their wallpaper. And he is really aggressively just accusing them of being murderers.
He's terrible at sort of tiptoeing around at this.
Right. And then we meet, finally, the doctor, Dr. Klopek. That was a gross scene. It really grossed me out, the eating of the sardine on the pretzel, and then the hand.
Have you ever had a sardine before?
I have never had a sardine. I will never have a sardine. No, they're bad. What did you think of, the cartooniness and the silliness of that dream sequence? Yeah. Him being roasted on a barbecue.
I think that's good because it gives us great trailer moments, because what can they really show in the trailer of just people being suspicious? You've got to have these big cartoony moments.
In fact, there's a lot in the trailer that's not actually in the movie.
Yeah. It kind of internalizes or externalizes what's going on in Tom Hanks's mind. But it kind of it allows us to have those, again, that heighten the moments of melodrama when we still don't know anything about these neighbors yet. You know, it's kind of a big mystery, and then when they finally discover it, then it's kind of like very plain. Like, there's no giant melodrama except them destroying someone's home.
Yeah. Because we get to meet the doctor, and he seems very normal, and he sort of has an explanation for everything. And
the most playfulness when the first hour is the most playful of the whole thing, because it's all this melodrama of what if, and them not, and trying to discover things and stuff like that. And it's not, and then the second half it gets a little more bogged down in. It's just like a little too much shoe leather of all these little things they need to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because I thought it was sort of funny, their whole plan to, like, cut the power. You get funny moments from it, though. So they cut the power to the Klopek's house because they have all these alarms and things. And Art, like, he just gets, for the rest of the movie, all these funny moments of, like, oh, gosh, my fingernails are black. His credit cards are all melted into stumps. But then Bruce Dern just sits on the roof and watches them.
Yeah, he's not given much at that point.
But they go dig up the backyard, and each hole has its own shovel. As if they're like, well, we brought 8 shovels. We need to dig 8 holes. And the way you know we're done is we just prop the shovel up in the dirt. That was cartoony. Yeah. That was something straight out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon there. I did like also that Art changes costumes for everything. Like, he's in the golf costume, and then he changes into like a meter man costume, or what do you call the people who climb up the phone
lineman?
Yeah, he's dressed up like that. He just changes his costume for everything.
This is all play for him.
Yeah, and he's totally an instigating dick. But of course, Corey Feldman at this point, once things start getting real, he's calling people over, like all his 80s teenage, I guess, young adult maybe. I find it real hard to pin down what he's all about. Orders pizza, 1 million pizzas apparently.
Yeah, it kind of turned into a block party.
Yeah, where everybody's just watching the shenanigans unfold. And then we get to the end, where Tom Hanks is going to town in the basement.
So yeah, in the basement so they're convinced that they're killing people. Mm-hmm. They're convinced that they killed the old neighbor. Is it Walter?
Walter.
Because they found his toupee in their home, along with mail, and so they find this enormous furnace in the basement, and then there's like this pile of ash, like this, and then they start digging up the floor, convinced that there's bones buried in there.
They spend the whole day doing this, too.
Yeah. Because the neighbors had already told them that they were going to be out for the day.
Mm-hmm. Which to me means I'll be home by 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Luckily for these guys, it meant like 8 or 9. It's dark out. Yeah, so he just will not give up. He digs until he hits a gas line, and the house explodes.
and then he comes out with like half of his face melted off.
Mm-hmm. And we get that wonderful Hanks moment where he just sort of falls down the stairs, which Tom Hanks is so... He's just so brilliant at this brand of everyman physical humor that's not over the top. Mm-hmm. It's just so familiar, and it's like warms you up.
Yeah.
It's just so good. Even when he's doing that Tom Hanks yelling, like the early 80s or the late 80s Tom Hanks yelling, like, I am calm, like, yes, I'm relaxing. I'm going to relax with my beers. I'm Tom Hanks yelling. I just love it. I'm glad he's in this movie. I don't think it would be as good without him in that role, because you immediately like him, even though he's making these terrible choices and really being the villain of this piece from some points of view.
This was kind of the tail end of Tom Hanks playing these kind of weenies who can't get what he wants and is yelling all the time. You know, after this was like Joe versus the Volcano and something else, and then it was Philadelphia, and it became for a while mainly dramatic. You know, until like A League of Their Own,
which is a movie I love. I love it so much.
The most excellent 90s podcast. We will
next. No, it's the Totally Tubular 90s podcast, right? Very excited. Like, I love the end though. I like the way it plays out. We watched an alternate ending, but I like the way this ending plays out, because we get that moment of Tom Hanks just exploding at his neighbors, like, you guys are monsters.
Yeah.
This is your fault. You broke into these people's homes because they're a little bit different than us, because they don't water their lawns as often as we do. Like, you turn me into a monster, put me in the ambulance, and take me to the hospital.
So he gets that moment where they realize that they're the bad guys, and the bad guys haven't really done anything wrong. And we're led to believe that for about 60 seconds until then in the ambulance, they try to kill him.
So I guess so we watched the original ending where the ambulance drives into Art's house and starts another fire. They tumble out on the gurney and ride through the town fighting on the back of a gurney. The pizza truck spills over with just like 1 million pizzas. And how does Corey Feldman have money to buy these pizzas?
Parents, man.
I want to solve the mystery of what his character is all about. And then
that's what we need is more scenes.
More scenes of explaining to me what Corey Feldman's deal is. Yeah. I did read that he was like friends with Michael Jackson at the time that they were filming this, so the chimpanzee Bubbles would always be in his trailer, and Joe Dante had to finally put his foot down and be like, "Get that chimpanzee out of here. No, thank you." And then the alternate ending was just like a more boring version of that.
Yeah, just a flatter, less dramatic,
less fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Same result. And then we know they shot an ending where Ray is killed.
Oh, yeah? Oh, where it's kind of the dark twist where the ambulance, and he's in there, and it's like, well, Mr. Tom Hanks, it's time to die.
Yeah.
The end, the movie.
Yeah, and they kill him, and they were like, oh, this is too dark.
Yeah.
Don't do it. But I've never seen that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can find it anyplace.
Or should you?
And then what did you think of the two sort of buttons? We get two buttons on this movie, both of which I find not great.
Okay, so what are the two buttons?
Art's wife gets home. My wife is home.
My wife!
That's button one. And then button two is Corey Feldman. He like says goodbye to Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Who finally decides to go on a fucking nice vacation with his family. Get it together, Tom Hanks. Go on a nice vacation with your family.
And where's your child gone?
He's gone.
You're shooting at night. You couldn't... you only get the kids for 4 hours a day.
Couldn't get him.
That's the real answer. Is that you can only have minors on set for a certain amount of time, and they still have to be going to school, and so you use any excuse you can to not have them on set. God, those Harry Potter movies must have been a fucking nightmare.
Yikes! Don't sign me up for that. So Tom Hanks sort of tells Corey Feldman, like, look after the neighborhood for me while I'm away. And then Corey Feldman turns to camera and says... Breaking
the fourth wall, turning to the audience and saying, I love this neighborhood.
What did you think of... What?
And that was in both endings.
It sure was.
That was the thing to keep.
Yeah. They're like, whatever happens. I wonder if that happens in the one where Tom Hanks dies.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks is dead. Everyone realizes their mistake. Corey Feldman turns to camera and says, I love this neighborhood.
Yeah.
What did you think of this?
I didn't like those buttons. In the ending that's in the actual movie, I like the much more melodramatic trunk that is full. That was like one of the things I remembered from the actual movie way back when, is the trunk popping up and they're just being filled with skulls and bones and things like that. That's way better than what they had in the deleted scene, which was very kind of flat.
I agree that that's funnier, but it's also sort of like Corey Feldman just being like, oh yeah, there's a trunk full of bones here. Did you guys not see this trunk full of bones?
Whoa!
This is a trunk full of bones. So if there hadn't been that, and then Dr. Klopek just sort of sheepishly is like, did I do that?
Yeah, the problem with the ending is that there's so many moving parts. It's not simple. It's not like boom, boom, boom. It's just all these branches going off.
So do you think this movie holds up? Do you think that it could be remade for today's audience? What do you think?
I think it holds up as well as it did back then. I think the things that don't work about it and things that do work about it have more or less stayed the same. Honestly, I think so. The answer, I guess, is yes, it holds up. That doesn't make it necessarily a better or worse movie. But I do know some people who this was a very special, silly movie to them, and seeing Tom Hanks and all the darkness and all the over the topness that they loved.
It's sort of safe
So I don't want,
darkness.
yeah, exactly. And so I can't. There's parts that just didn't work for me, but I can't really rag on it. I can't say that it was bad. It wasn't necessarily my type of taste, but I certainly enjoyed like the beginning, the first hour.
I think you could remake this.
Yeah.
I think there's some way where you could remake this.
Yeah. The problem is that there's been so many variations of the house at the edge of the neighborhood.
The neighborhood.
Yeah, the weird ones like.
And I think it looks different now. Like, obviously, it would have to be a more multicultural neighborhood that didn't just have white people in it.
Because part of the story is also about, like, what is suburbia? Like, suburbia, it was kind of a relatively new concept, like from the 60s to the 80s, It's like these suburban areas, just large areas built of just homes and things like that. It was a little more integrated before in terms of homes and shops and all that stuff.
Yeah, and like just the sort of the idea of that.
I mean, E.T. kind of deals with that too.
Yeah. And I think that Klopek says at one point, like, this is the problem with suburbia, is that you come here, you paint your house the wrong shade, you forget to mow your lawn once, you kill a few people, and all of a sudden you're the enemy. I thought that was kind of a funny line that maybe they should have kept.
Yeah, and so if you remade this, maybe you'd make it a gated community, you know, and you'd have like the HOA. Yeah,
and maybe the question is like, are we?
Yeah, make it even a little more so, because if anything, like, some like suburban, it's a little more, nuts in terms of control and organization and things like that.
Yeah, and why are we suspicious of these things that we're suspicious of?
Yeah.
And I think, we've sort of gone around and around about these like sort of gender swap things, but I think one way that you update it is you make it the wives who are
suspicious and the guys who are dense.
And the guys who are like, come on, honey, you're being a little bit over the top. You know how you're home from your dog.
I think if we're gonna modernize it, you would blend it a little more, like
you have
instead
at least
of
one gay couple.
Well, yeah, but instead of it making like the guys versus the girls, you could have it be some of the girls, some of the guys,
And don't just make it that thing where the wife is a stick in the mud.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not sticks in the mud. We are the mud.
Like
Wait,
you could see someone like Kristen Wiig and Will Forte be on the same team.
Absolutely.
Throw
a Kevin Hart in there.
Yeah, and then you've got like a weird thing about like their two best buds on this, and what do their partners think is going on? You could add some complexity there. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I like it. Who's their weird teenage neighbor? It's still Corey Feldman.
It's still Corey Feldman. Yeah, absolutely.
He still lives on that block.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. But he's playing Corey Feldman.
Yes, Corey Feldman just lives on the block. I would go see this movie.
Yeah,
write it right now. We've come up with another winner. So on a scale of like 1 trunk skull
femurs,
to 10,
how many femurs?
Yes, how many femurs do you give this on a scale of 1 femur to 10 femurs?
Of how well it holds up.
I'm
going with 6.5.
Okay. I think that I would maybe 6.5. I think
I feel like we've been a little tough on the Burbs.
We have.
There's a lot to like.
I think that this is a fun movie,
and for some people, there's a lot to love.
There is. I don't know. I think you could find a more fun. No, maybe I don't. You're right.
That's the thing. I think if anything, like, one of the reasons we're kind of negative Nancy's right now is because the first hour works so well, and then it gets kind of just bogged down.
Yeah, maybe if they picked up the pace on that on ramping it up, if they had heightened it faster, which I think a modern update would do, like they would take it to 9 as soon as the first mistake.
Yeah, I feel like the best version of the 100-minute long The Burbs is like a 92-minute The Burbs.
I'm with you. I enjoyed it, though. I like it. I recommend it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think people should watch it. What is your deep cut recommendation? If people like the Burbs, what fun thing would they also...
That's a great question. What's your deep cut recommendation?
I don't have
All right,
one
let's take a
Oh,
pause.
oh, wait.
Yes.
Wait. Okay, I know what mine is.
Okay, go for it.
And it's totally, the threads of this are so paper thin. The connective tissue is this. So I want to recommend Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle.
Oh, yeah.
The most recent, it's not a remake. It's sort of
I just saw that
sequel.
2 nights ago.
I love it so much.
I came up with a couple of jokes for that were a little better than what they had.
Better than what they had. I love it so much. I think that Jack Black is so wonderful in it, and The Rock is so wonderful in it. I think that they're all. It is such a wonderful movie. And then at the end, I don't want to spoil it, but there is a Hanks connection that made me really happy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where I was just like, what? Yay! And so you'll have to watch Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. You're welcome. And then when you get to the end, you'll know why I'm connecting it.
Well,
to
they
this.
also have like the dark gray house at the end of the...
Yes, they do. Thank you for connecting it further. I guess they all live on the same street in this.
Yes.
And they have the scary house on the corner. Mm-hmm. Which is where the Hanks connection comes in.
Paper thin.
Yeah. All right.
So my also paper thin deep cut recommendation is another Joe Dante movie, which I also haven't seen in as long, but I have a really fond memory of, which is Matinee.
Oh.
Do you remember that?
Is that the one?
It's during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of intercutting the paranoia that, oh my God, the world is going to end this weekend because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, his dad is building a bunker, but there's also a visiting kind of movie theater experience, you know, with like, you know, the vibrators under the chairs and the giant ant people, and
They actually come through the screen.
yeah, and so it's like a crossover between these childhood memories of when the world was going to end and like these over the top kind of movie road shows.
Oh,
So,
okay.
with John
That's good.
Goodman.
All right. So do we want to know how the Burbs did against its competition in 1989?
Yes. So what was it up against?
It's number 34, and it was beat out by the top movies, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Oh, well, number 1 is Batman. Then Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 2, Look Who's Talking, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Back to the Future 2, Ghostbusters 2, Driving Miss Daisy, Parenthood, and the Dead Poets Society.
That is a year.
That is a year. We should do all those movies.
Let's do it right now.
Let's do them right now.
You're in for a treat, listeners.
This is the 12-hour long
marathon
podcast. Okay, so this is sort of the official end of like what we were calling season 1.
Yeah.
And rather than move into a season 2 where
we go back to the 1980 and then rip all the way to 89 again.
we're going to just kind of let it flow.
We're just going to let it free flow.
So kind of explain what our concept is then.
So I guess, okay, so instead of kind of like doing it in seasons, we're just going to keep doing episodes. And instead of there being kind of the guiding principle that we go from 80, 81, 82 sequentially, we're just going to kind of like go through cool 80s movies that we really like. We're not necessarily going to do all the big blockbusters. We're going to do occasionally sometimes some double features, I guess, where we do like two, like maybe we're talking about 2 Sylvester Stallone movies,
Like a
back
mini
to back.
theme
Yeah, like a
almost.
mini theme, like 2 movies back to back, like maybe the same actor, or maybe it's 2 James Bond movies or 2 Back to the Future movies or something like that. And you know, just kind of go with our instinct, our fancy. You know, we've got a huge list of 80s movies that are crazy, that were influential to us. You guys have let us know what 80s movies you think are totally 80s. And we're also going to see some stuff that we've never seen that other people have seen.
Absolutely. So keep those suggestions coming, though. Like, if there's something you want to see us talk about, do let us know. You know, hit us up on the pod, mostexcellentpod.com, mostexcellentpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, Most Excellent Pod, and Facebook, Most Excellent Facebook group. Let us know what 80s movies you want to see, because we're just going to do what's exciting to us.
Yeah.
The
reason that we're doing this podcast is because these were the movies of our childhood. You know, it was a specific time. We had a specific memory of some of these, and just want to see if they hold up, or we want to revisit some stuff that was influential to us.
Absolutely. And be just a teaser, there may be some exciting live shows happening. Maybe if you're in the Phoenix area, keep your ear to the ground for that news. Yeah. All right. So where can people find Nathan Blackwell?
So you can find me at Squishy Studios at squishystudios.com. And you can also check out my sci-fi comedy web series, Voyage Trekkers.
Do that for sure. You can find me, in addition to all the most excellent places, at nctphoenix.com, or live and in person at NCT Phoenix, the place, which you can find out about on the online.
Right.
All right. All that podcast stuff, tell a friend, share us, subscribe, help us out, help people find us. We appreciate it. And always remember to keep the Most Excellent podcast motto in mind. Be excellent to each other, and Satan is good. Satan is our pal.
Oh, do we tease what the next movie is?
Oh, we should. Absolutely. Let's tease what the next movie is.
And tune in not next week, it's in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
And tune in 2 weeks when we watch Crocodile Dundee.
Crocodile Dundee. I'm very excited. He smokes in an elevator in that movie. An elevator! It's madness!
The 80s.
So join us for that. Thank you so much. Bye.
Good night, mate.
Good night.